My name is Lori Power. I'm a group benefit consultant, and part of my job of being consistent with my clients is to meet people who can help them through these unprecedented times. Brian Litvin is just one of those people. As his motto says, he turns hidden opportunities into success. And as soon as I saw Brian present, I knew he was somebody I needed to know. Take me through a little bit about what you do, Brian, but primarily how you got started in what you do.
Lori, we're a firm of accountants, a boutique firm, and we specialize in sales tax, both Canadian sales tax and international value-added taxes. And sales taxes are such a funny area of expertise that so many people often ask, why would you get involved with sales taxes, number one? And number two, it's such an easy tax. Where do problems arise? Well, I got into the sales tax world purely fortuitously. It happened at a point in time. And in there, I've been involved with it for 15 years. In that period of time, I have been responsible for saving companies and finding in excess of $75 million in sales tax, and in sales tax in preventing sales tax bleed or leakage. So it's quite, from an easy tax, it can be a very, very costly tax.
I'm astounded that, one, more people don't understand what's hidden in their bookkeeping, first and foremost. But I can see how easily it can happen. When you and I were talking, we talked about a new company into Canada that was getting all their paperwork ready and wanting to know what to do. And they took advice from the FedEx person on what to charge for GST. And they thought that was it. That conversation wouldn't have even happened with their bookkeeper or accountant. They just assumed they had it correct. Take me
100%.
through that example. That blows my mind.
Lori, that's actually a good example. I'm glad you remembered that. Company, they are based in the United States, selling product into Canada, selling to customers across Canada and selling to Amazon. So they knew that they had to get registered for GST. They approached their courier. It was actually UPS. Why they asked the UPS guy, I don't know, because they're good at delivering goods. And they were told that they have to charge 5% GST across Canada. So that's all they did. Most of their business was in Ontario. And they didn't know until the CRA came knocking on their door and audited them that they had to be charging 13% Ontario HST. And CRA audited them, and they said, you know, you owe us the 8% shortfall that you hadn't charged clients and hadn't remitted. And this went back 4 years. So they were in the middle of an audit. They had no clue what to do. So they were referred to our firm. And when they came to us, they came with a proposed assessment from CRA for $98,000 plus penalties and interest. We took over the audit, and the auditor was actually very grateful that they could speak to someone who understood tax. In fact, the auditor was from Edmonton, coincidentally, and we reduced that assessment to $53,000 and obviously reduced the penalties and interest. And then every single cent of the $53,000 was recoverable from clients, which the client had no clue. So from nearly shelling out and paying $98,000 plus penalties and interest, which would have probably been $105,000, $106,000. It cost them $3,000.
That would be the value of knowing people. I thanks so much for coming in, Patrick. He and I were talking about this, Brian, the other day, as I had told you. It's the value of knowing who to call when you need them most.
Yeah.
So how wonderful that somebody knew you could go in and you could parachute in, take care of that situation, and see that company not be balled under by that audit. There are other situations though, Brian, where people just don't pay attention to what's going on that regular bookkeeping. And again, a chance meeting with somebody who basically dared you to find money in their books because they were so secure in that. And this was somebody who had heard you speak. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. What happens often, Laurie, and usually people are so laser focused on their business, including bookkeepers, all staff. And so it should be, they laser focused on the business that they're in. So anything that happens that's a little extraordinary often slips through the cracks. The story that you ask about, I was participated in a webinar, I believe it was June last year, as we were starting to get back to business, and the people businesses were looking for ways to try and generate cash. I was invited to talk on a webinar, and at the end of the webinar, there was multiple participants, cash flow experts, foreign exchange people. But at the end of the webinar, a fellow contacted me who had been at the webinar, and he's in a niche business. And he said to me, he thinks they're doing everything right. The business had grown dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years, and asked if I would do a review. And I agreed to. And in fact, his business was kind of relatively smaller than I would usually look at. I did the review for them, and I found them a significant amount of money, mid-5 figures, which went straight to the bottom line, straight on their very next return. They recovered it and generated immediate cash, which was wonderful. He was grateful for that. It was wonderful. But the bigger picture is that I identified a system issue. And that system issue came about because of the nature of their business. It dealt with importing goods and being cleared into the country, GST on imports. And they'd been doing this system it had been 1.5 years or 2 years in their growth span. And certainly something they're going to incur for as long as they're in business. And they were bleeding GST and no one had any visibility to it. They have an annual review by a firm of accountants who do a great job, but they'd never ever see this. The savings I've identified, it gave them a fix for their system, and there's a guaranteed. The minimum they're going to save each year is $25,000 to $30,000. It's an absolute guarantee. So, as tax people, we look with a 4-year window because that's the statute of limitations in Canada. Guaranteed, he's saved $100,000, $120,000. Just prevention, never mind the cash,
Now that system glitch that you found within, that's not unusual to this particular person. This is something that, like you said, is systemic. You can pick that out in a lot of businesses. Take me through how, because that must be one of the first things that you look for when you start kind of the forensic search through the GST and the VAT.
Well, Laurie, it's not kind of the first. What we do, high level, we do a forensic review of data relating to any GST, HST, or sales taxes that a firm incurs on their purchasing side. We do sampling of sales taxes on their output side. And we do that across the world. So GST or VAT across in other countries. We analyze data, and the analysis gives us trends and shows anomalies, identifies anomalies, and then we investigate each anomaly. So through that investigation, we identify areas that companies have missed to capturing the input taxes they're entitled to. And we then analyze the causes behind that and upcoming system issues, if there are. System issues aren't that frequent, but I've found system issues in some of the biggest companies in the country. One in particular was crazy. They had more accountants working in their organization than you could ever imagine. And they had a system issue that had gone undetected for 18 years at least.
So when somebody is coming to see
were
you,
astronomical.
when somebody is coming to see you for the first time, let's say they're not in a fire like this American company, or they're not challenging you just because, what does it typically look like? Like, why would somebody even start if they don't identify that there's a system issue and they don't identify that they're being audited for a particular reason? Why does somebody start to look into this?
That's a very good question, Laurie. Generally speaking, companies don't start looking into it. We approach companies and say, you should have us do this. Most of our work is done on a success fee model. So we don't charge a penny unless we're successful and find lost money. And then we take a percentage of that. But most companies, unless they've been exposed to it, to HST or efficiency review or GST efficiency review, if they're unaware that it exists, it's difficult. They're not going on the internet looking for, geez, let's find a GST review. That's not happening. But people who've had it done once will have a review done every few years, cyclically, every 4 years at most, and that's not uncommon. But to quote the CFO of a massive company, the Taylor Guitar Company, I was talking to her, telling her what we do. Her name's Barbara, and she said, I'm sure we do everything perfectly across the world. They have multiple locations. She said, but you never know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know what you don't know. So, as I say, people aren't knocking on the doors if they don't know that the service exists, but it's definitely a health check. It's like going to a doctor and annually for your annual health check. That should be done in most businesses of a certain size.
Do you find that the majority of customers that you do work with successfully that are more international, they're dealing with multiple sales taxes from different jurisdictions, and they're having to keep up on those different jurisdictions? That was something that struck me when I first met you, was how if you're dealing in multiple countries, you have to be up to speed on how everybody deals with those things.
Laurie, absolutely right, that people dealing multinationally really need to be on top of it, and they're incredible, or not incredible, they're multiple avenues where sales tax leakage or VAT bleed, as it's known, occurs on a daily basis. And it is difficult if you're in the business of selling widgets, manufacturing and selling widgets. it's quite difficult to keep track of unless you have dedicated personnel being on track of the threshold requirements in various countries around the world, the various rates, etc. But the majority of our work is done nationally, domestically in Canada, with companies that aren't trading internationally.
Okay.
There's the potential for GST leakage is ripe across the business world.
I would think even from province to province, Brian, if I'm looking at, if I have outlets in British Columbia and I have outlets in the Maritimes as opposed to just in Alberta and Ontario, well, then I have 4 different situations
Absolutely.
that I'm going to have to deal with when it comes to keeping up with the tax in those particular areas. And what I find when I'm working with clients is they usually have a centralized accounting area.
100%, Laurie. In British Columbia, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, they have sales tax, they're provincial sales taxes, which is an end user consumption tax. But there are nuances. So national businesses dealing in the various provinces run into potential hiccups with the provincial sales taxes. What you're forgetting to ask is the size of business that really should be looking at our services. I would have given you a different answer a year ago. We work with clients that multinational, multi-billion-dollar clients, and we work with clients domestically that have a multi-billion-dollar turnover type clients, and we work with clients domestically with just under $5 million worth of turnover. Enough activity that any business with activity, that the volumes are such that owners and bookkeepers can't keep track of every single transaction. Non-resident companies, we work with. We also do compliance work. I didn't mention that, but in terms of GST, HST efficiency, we have clients, non-residents, that are in the $300,000 to $500,000 range, and of course to multinationals, and we're very effective for them. That company that you asked me about initially, that American company, that they do for $500,000 a year, $600,000 worth of turnover. And in 4 years, they managed to get to an audit where they were about to pay out $100,000.
And who can afford that in these days?
Yeah, Brian, listen, I hear you. You're preaching to the choir in terms of, tax audits and financial structures making sense. My background, we did it in 5 different countries around the world, and we learned rapidly through the School of Hard Knocks and making sure and understanding, what that looks like. We know our strengths, but we know our weaknesses, and we put the value of having proper legal advice. We see the value of bringing in. It's one thing to have an accountant or an accounting firm, but it's also another thing to have an individual who understands the complexity and the sensitivity in every jurisdiction around the world. And I can attest to you that we had firsthand experience when we expanded our franchise business coast to coast in Canada. Well, I'm based out of Sherwood Park. So the county, Strathcona County, has a different philosophy to the people maybe in Quebec or Newfoundland or British Columbia. When we entered into the U.S. market, we got schooled quickly. The U.S. is an amazing opportunity, but just within different states, within different counties. Case in point, state of Colorado, every county's tax scheme, it's a good British term, looks different. When we entered into the Middle East, in Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai, wow, a totally different tax structure. And as an international expanding in foreign, absolutely, you've got to have your ducks in order to be able to understand. And sometimes that means multiple of layers of companies, holdcos, numbered companies, LLCs, but also making sure that you understand the flow. And so one of the things that we're preaching to our clients, or clients that we're signing up now, because business has been vigorous for the last several months, and that's what COVID has done, is we're advising our clients, and I think you're providing some amazing advice, is that you can be a good Canadian-based company, whether you're from Saskatchewan or Alberta, BC, wherever you are, but you can now be part of the global economy. But if you're going to be part of the global economy, what is your tax structure going to look like? Does it mean you have to have a offshore tax, company in the Virgin Islands, or do you have to go register it in Dublin if you're going to do, trade in a European nation? So those are things that for a lot of folks, and not no ill disrespect, but a lot of folks just don't understand that. And the Canadian government and the Alberta government and the provincial governments, they're doing a great job of making sure that their hand is out, that they get their GST, they get their taxes, they're making sure that the assets are being taxed accordingly. But there's ways professionally and legally for business owners that you can structure that to mitigate the tax component. And then the other aspect of this thing that I get really excited about, especially when companies are getting ready to exit, what does that look like? And there's all kinds of, tax structures and benefits that, folks like you and your firm is offering, because the tax world has changed. It's become very complex, very sophisticated. And because it's interesting, you're going to like this one, I think groups like yours now know more than the Canadian government.
With some things.
Yeah, something.
Well, I think you hit on a good point there, though, Patrick. You hit on a good point, and this is to say what Brian does, is the governments are good at holding out their hand and having it paid, but how much, Brian, are they due back, right? And can all of these clients benefit from knowing Brian and be able to save money, like you said, year over year over year, by just having it looked at? Across
the world, businesses, when it comes to sales tax, when it comes to tax, they'll invest huge dollars and time in minimizing their corporate tax exposure. It's kind of built into the human psyche. And they'll spend loads of dollars with big four accounting firms, with any accounting force, to minimize corporate tax. But sales tax, they pay no attention. The biggest attention that's paid to sales tax is ensuring they pay enough, they collect whatever they're supposed to and pay all of that.
That's right.
They don't put focus into the minimizing sales tax to recover what they're entitled to. And oftentimes the cost of sales tax is a lot bigger than corporate tax.
That's right.
Yeah.
If the number is big enough, if the number is big enough and it accumulates, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, it's under Patrick. Some of the findings that I found have been unbelievable.
For coming out and enjoying our chit chat with Brian. And Brian, I am so appreciative that you took the time. I know it's just a phone call, right? Like it's a phone call. It could save them, thousands upon thousands of dollars.
That call we spoke about, that client I did after that webinar, that's exactly what it was. It was one telephone call. Yeah. And the client said to me, that was the best call I've ever made in a long time.
Right, real quick question. Where are you based? Where's home base for you?
Toronto.
So this has been very, very good.
Thank you so much